How a wooden oar humiliated Japan's greatest swordsman. In the chronicles of samurai legends, there are countless tales of godlike skill and impossible bravery. We hear about swordsmen who could slice a falling leaf in two, or warriors who could single-handedly face down an entire army. But this story transcends mere combat. It's not just a tale of skill, but of profound strategy. It's not about an epic clash of steel, but about masterful psychological warfare. This is the story of a duel that has become immortalized in Japanese culture, a showdown between two of the most legendary swordsmen who ever lived. One was a celebrated prodigy, armed with a ridiculously long sword and a technique as swift as a swallow in flight. The other was an undefeated rogue, a man who played by his own rules. On a deserted island in the early 17th century, these two titans would clash. But the weapon that decided the fateful encounter wasn't a legendary katana. It was quite literally a piece of wood. On the remote shores of Ganryu Island on April 13th, 1612, one of Japan's most famous swordsmen, Sasaki Kojiro, was waiting. And waiting, his opponent, Miyamoto Musashi, was hours late, a staggering insult in the honor-bound world of the samurai. When Musashi finally appeared, he wasn't carrying a gleaming katana, but a crude wooden oar he'd carved on the boat ride over. This wasn't just disrespectful. It was a calculated psychological assault. This is the story of how a simple piece of wood in the hands of a master strategist humiliated one of Japan's most revered warriors and became the stuff of legend. How could a man with an OAR possibly defeat a swordsman at the absolute peak of his power? The answer isn't in the weapon, but in the mind of the man who wielded it. Section 1. The problem, the demon of the Western provinces. To truly appreciate the audacity of Musashi's plan, you must first understand the man he was about to face. Sasaki Kojiro was a genuine monster of the blade. While his exact birth year is lost to history, he was born in an era of constant conflict and was a total prodigy. While other samurai simply trained, Kojiro innovated. He was known by the intimidating name, the Demon of the Western Provinces. He was essentially a celebrity warrior, backed by the powerful Lord Hosokawa Tadaoki, and his fame was widespread. What made Kojiro a phenomenon was his weapon and his signature move. He wielded a no-dachi, a massive field sword with a blade over 3 feet long, which everyone called the drying pole. Wielding a blade of that length is incredibly difficult, and Kojiro was its undisputed master. A longer blade gives you a significant advantage in reach. In a duel where an inch is the difference between life and death, Kojiro's sword gave him what seemed like an unbeatable edge. It was like bringing a rifle to a pistol fight, but the sword was only half the story. Kojiro's real genius was his signature move, the Tsubamgeshi, or the swallow cut. Inspired by the darting, unpredictable flight of a swallow, it was a move of blinding speed. Accounts describe it as a rapid downward slash immediately followed by an upward one from below, designed to catch an opponent as they're still reacting to the first strike. It was a feint and a killing blow in one inescapable motion. It was said that no one who faced the swallow cut lived to describe it. Kojiro was the living embodiment of the samurai ideal. He was disciplined, polished, and deeply respected. His entire life was dedicated to Bushido, the way of the warrior, which placed honor and respect above all else. He agreed to duel Musashi to settle their intense rivalry and prove, once and for all, who was the greatest swordsman in Japan. The duel was set for April 13th, 1612, on the small island of Ganryu. For Kojiro, this was more than a fight, it was a ceremony. He arrived on time, dressed impeccably, the very image of a samurai master. He expected a battle of skill against skill. He had no idea he was walking into a mental ambush. Section 2. The underdog and his plan. The unconventional Ronin. The man challenging this perfect samurai was his complete opposite. Miyamoto Musashi wasn't a polished court warrior. He was a force of nature. A Ronin, or masterless samurai, he'd been fighting and winning duels since he was just 13 years old. By the time he met Kojiro, he was undefeated in over 60 contests. But where Kojiro was refined, Musashi was rough. Where Kojiro valued perfect form, Musashi valued one thing: victory. He was a pragmatist in a world of romantics. Musashi's entire philosophy, which he later codified in his famous work, The Book of Five Rings, was built on one brutal principle: win. How you did it was secondary. This doesn't mean he lacked skill. He was such a master that he created his own school, the Nitten Ichirira, famous for its revolutionary use of two swords at once. And yet, he often chose not to use them. He was known to walk into duels with a bakken, a wooden practice sword against an opponent with a live blade. This wasn't arrogance. It was pure, cold calculation. Musashi understood that a duel wasn't a game. It was a battle of wills, and the fight began long before swords were ever drawn. He was a master of psychological warfare. He knew a man's mind was his greatest weakness. An opponent who is angry, frustrated, or full of doubt is an opponent who makes fatal mistakes. And Musashi was an expert at planting those seeds of chaos. He would intentionally arrive hours late to duels, not out of laziness, but to disrespect his opponent, making them wait, seething in their own anxiety. He'd show up looking disheveled, a deliberate insult to the formal samurai class. Every action was a small cut to his opponent's spirit. When the duel with Kojiro was set, Musashi knew he couldn't win a straightforward fight. Trying to match Kojiro's speed and reach head-on would be playing Kojiro's game. And Musashi never played his opponent's game, so he devised a plan to completely destroy Kojiro's composure before their blades could ever meet. He requested the duel be on a remote island to heighten the tension and isolation. He agreed to the date. And then he began setting his trap. The boat trip to Ganryu Island wasn't just a commute. It was the final critical step in his master plan. He was preparing his ultimate weapon. Section 3. The solution. The psychological takedown. The sun was high over Ganryu Island. The officials were irritated. And Sasaki Kojiro, the demon of the western provinces, was fuming. Musashi was 3 hours late. In the world of the samurai, this was the ultimate sign of contempt. Kojiro, a man of immense pride, was pacing the beach, his composure cracking under the strain. His pure, white-hot anger was precisely what Musashi was counting on. This was stage 1 of the takedown. When Musashi's boat was finally spotted, the crowd's annoyance curdled into disbelief, then rage. Musashi was a mess. His hair was untied, his clothes a wreck. He looked like he just rolled out of bed, not like a man about to fight one of Japan's finest swordsmen. This was the second insult, a clear message. You're not even worth getting ready for. As Musashi stepped onto the shore, Kojiro's fury boiled over. He drew his incredible 3-foot sword, the drying pole, and dramatically threw his scabbard into the sea, statement that this was a fight to the death. Musashi just smiled. His response was quiet, but it cut deeper than any blade. If you have no more use for your sheath, he said, you are already dead. Then came the final masterstroke of psychological genius. Musashi revealed his weapon. It wasn't his famous twin katanas. It wasn't even a real sword. It was a bakken, a wooden sword. But this was no ordinary training tool. On the boat ride over, Musashi had taken a spare oar and carved it into a long, crude wooden blade. This was a brilliant, multi-layered strategy. First, it was the ultimate insult. Bringing a wooden stick to a duel with a master like Kojiro was to call him an amateur, unworthy of real steel. Musashi was declaring that Kojiro's entire life's work meant nothing. Second, and more critically, it was a tactical masterstroke. Musashi had deliberately carved the oar to be longer than Kojiro's famous node. The one overwhelming advantage Kojiro had over every opponent in his reach was instantly neutralized. Kojiro's entire fighting style was built on controlling distance with his long blade. Now, facing an even longer weapon, that advantage was nullified. The drying pole was no longer the longest weapon on the beach. In one move, Musashi had shattered Kojiro's confidence and dismantled his core strategy. Before the fight even started, Kojiro had already lost. Section 4. The climax and aftermath, the humiliation and the legend. With his mind clouded by rage and his strategy in tatters, the duel itself was brutally short. Blinded by fury and the morning sun, which Musashi had strategically positioned at his back, Kojiro charged. He unleashed his signature move, the lightning fast swallow cut. It was the technique that had won him countless battles. The blade was incredibly close. Some accounts say it even sliced through Musashi's headband. But Musashi was calm. He was focused. He had studied Kojiro and anticipated his attack. As Kojiro committed to his legendary strike, Musashi simultaneously dodged and brought his heavy wooden oar crashing down on Kojiro's head. The demon of the western provinces, the celebrated swordsman, crumpled to the sand. As Kojiro lay stunned, Musashi delivered a second, decisive blow to his ribs, and the duel was over. The great Sasaki Kojiro had been defeated, not by a legendary sword in a heroic clash, but by a splintered boat oar in a swift, merciless takedown. The humiliation was absolute. Kojiro wasn't just killed. His legacy, his art, and his honor were systematically broken before the fatal blow ever landed. Musashi didn't linger to celebrate. He gave a slight bow to his fallen rival, turned, and calmly got back in his boat, making his escape before Kojiro's furious supporters could retaliate. He had made his point. The story of the duel on Ganryu Island spread like wildfire across Japan. It cemented Miyamoto Musashi's status as a kensei. His victory was proof of his philosophy. Strategy beats raw power, and the mind is a sharper weapon than any blade. The small island was eventually renamed Ganryujima. In honor of the style, Kojiro founded a permanent monument to the man who died there. The wooden oar was transformed from a simple tool into a symbol of unconventional genius. It represents the incredible truth Musashi spent his life proving. The greatest battles aren't won by the strength of your arm, but by the strength of your mind. While some legends claim Musashi gave up lethal duels after this fight, he did participate in later battles, further cementing his complex legacy. If you thought this dive into the mind of a master strategist was insane, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more legendary stories from history. What do you think? Was Musashi's strategy honorable or a cheap trick? Let us know in the comments below. So there you have it. The duel on Ganryu Island remains one of the most iconic moments in samurai history. It was the ultimate clash of styles, the polished prodigy versus the rugged strategist. Sasaki Kojiro was an incredible master of his craft. But on that day, he was completely outmaneuvered. Miyamoto Musashi didn't just defeat Kojiro. He psychologically deconstructed him, proving that a fight is won or lost in the mind long before the first blow is struck. The wooden oar wasn't just a weapon. It was a message, a symbol of a philosophy that has resonated for centuries. It reminds us that true mastery isn't just about perfecting a technique, but understanding the very nature of conflict itself. Thanks for watching.